Welcome.
We'll get started now.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Welcome, everyone who's joining us tonight here at Christopher Columbus Financial Aid Night. My name is Iris Martinez. I am the director of the Center for College and Career Guidance here at Christopher Columbus. We are very excited for tonight's program. As we all know, financial aid can be a little tricky, right? So our goal tonight is to shed some light and provide some insight into the process as your sons apply to college. Tonight's session is being live streamed. For those of you joining us live stream, please go ahead and submit your questions on the right-hand side of your screen. We will have time for Q&A towards the end of the session. We'll definitely also take questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, just hold off until the end so that we could go ahead and pass them along to our presenter, which I will go ahead and introduce right now. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you all Mr. Christopher Magnan from the University of Miami. I had the pleasure of working with him a couple years ago at so we're very, very excited that he's with us tonight to share some insights into the process.
Thank
Chris,
you so.
the floor is yours.
Oh my God, thank you so much. It's a pleasure seeing you. Haven't seen her in a little bit, but thank you all for being here, whether it be virtually or in person. My name is Chris Magnan. I work out of the Office of Student Financial Assistance and Employment at the University of Miami, and we are affectionately known as the Financial Aid Office, but we also oversee student employment, which can be part of financial aid, and I'm going to cover that. This is not going to be a presentation. This presentation is universal to all colleges and universities across the United States. So, and I'll share some of my personal experiences I was sharing with others. I am a father of 2 college students, one who's graduating this year and one who's just starting college this year as well. So I've sat in your seats. I've been through the FAFSA process. I've been through the CSS profile process, figuring out how to, afford a college education, Florida prepaid, Florida state aid programs. We're going to talk about everything today. We call this how to afford college, how to pay for college. But this is going to focus on financial aid. I will talk about Florida prepaid programs and other things throughout this presentation, but our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about some basic financial aid principles to get started, and then I'm going to get into different financial aid programs that exist. I hear that the vast majority of seniors here qualify for Bright Futures statistically, so kudos to you. We'll be talking all about Bright Futures scholarships and every other kind of scholarship under the sun, including merit awards, outside scholarships, private scholarships. We'll talk about the financial aid process itself, how to apply for financial aid. You know, whether or not you're applying for need-based aid or merit awards from the schools of choice. We'll talk about the CSS profile, the FAFSA form, what the differences are between the two and why different schools use the CSS profile application to help determine a need-based aid from their schools. We'll definitely be talking about how schools determine financial need if you are applying for need-based aid. After today, you might decide maybe we should apply for need-based aid, depending on which schools your sons are choosing and what the cost of attendance is there. You'll find that some schools do things differently than other schools, and I will share stories and a little bit about how may do things differently than some other schools, and I will share also about what other schools do differently than what we do. So we'll talk about financial aid timeline, some homework that you're going to need to be giving your students on getting them started with, if they haven't already started researching outside scholarships. Right now's the time to do it, because not only did the financial aid applications just open up this week, but we also started the scholarship season, and I'll explain that in just a bit. And I'm going to talk about personal finance education, because at the University of Miami, I'm not only the outreach person for the Office of Student Financial Assistance and Employment, affectionately known as the Financial Aid Office. I also am a new staff orientation representative and the director of the Money Management Program, which is a personal finance education program that we have for free available to all of our canes. And I'll talk about that at the end, because I think it's really important that students get a personal finance education as early as possible, especially as they're starting to get out in the real world and enter adulthood. So This first slide, I'm going to read the very top section, and then I'm not going to be a PowerPoint presenter from this point forward, I promise. But to the extent that they're able, and this comes from the Department of Education, to the extent that they're able, parents and students have the primary responsibility to contribute to educational expenses before an institution figures out what financial aid, especially need-based aid, that they're eligible for. To get started, keep in mind, we're going to share a PDF version of this presentation to you all. You're all going to have access to it, so you don't have to worry about getting screenshots of some of the screens I'm going to show you in just a little bit. But schools don't figure out how much you as a family can contribute to the education of the student. We rely on the FAFSA form to tell us that. They come up with something called an expected family contribution, and I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But it's a number that we use to determine need-based aid for students. The FAFSA form and the CSS profile application. How many people have heard of the CSS profile application? All right. It's a form that's used by about 18%. We just got louder? I was like, wow. Did my ears pop or something? The elevation on the third floor is kind of crazy. But no, it's a form that's used by almost all the Ivy League schools and most high-end private schools to determine need-based aid from their schools themselves. And I'll cover more about that in just a little bit. But when you do your FAFSA form, if you are applying for need-based aid, and when you do the CSS profile application, it's going to look at your income, your assets, how big your family is, how many people are in college, and then again, the FAFSA form, which is processed by the Department of Ed, and the CSS profile, which is processed by the College Board, which is the same college board that does the SATs and ACTs. They're going to give us that number called your expected family contribution. And that number is not a fixed number by individual, and it's going to be the same for every school and college that the students are attending. And it's not what your balance will be. It's not what you definitively are going to have to pay for college at all the different schools, because that's going to vary a lot from school to school. But it is an estimation of what they have calculated and gave to the school as to what you should be able to, in their eyes, contribute to the education of the student during their first year in college, okay? And yes, you do have to apply for financial aid each academic year, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Getting this clipper. What is going to be in a financial aid award package, though? All right? Financial aid can consist of a lot of different things, and I'll talk a lot about merit awards and state aid and bright futures and all those things, but scholarships and grants, these are the free money. How many people want free money? Every hand. I didn't see all hands go up. Come on, people. Who wants to pay for college? Nobody. Exactly. I didn't either, and I still don't, but I am. But scholarships and grants. Scholarships are awarded to students based on merit. They have to earn a scholarship. Scholarships are not for just scholars. Some people think, oh, I'm not going to apply for scholarships because I'm not in the top 10% of the class. I hope they're not thinking that way, and I'm going to reiterate that and talk more about that in just a little bit. But you don't have to be a scholar to get a scholarship, but you do have to meet certain criteria, whether it be the criteria of the state of Florida for a Bright Futures Award, or the merit awards from a school that the students are applying to, or private scholarships from private organizations all around the country. I'll talk about all of these in just a little bit. But scholarships are free money, all right? You don't have to pay them back. Grants are also free money, but grants are awarded based on financial need. You have to have a certain level of demonstrated financial need to qualify for grants. And grants can come from the federal government, they can come from the state of Florida, and they can come from the institutions themselves if the institutions even award grant money. And that's something you're going to end up needing to, you or the students are going to need to do a little bit of research on. You got to find out what financial aid do each of the schools that they're looking to apply to offer. But beyond the free money, there's self-help aid in the form of federal student loans, which are being forgiven for, I don't know if any of you are benefiting from the cancellation that just got approved recently. Having a lot of conversations with students about that. But federal student loans and work study. Loans are just that. They're a loan. They have to be paid back. They're not large amounts that are given to students when they're entering their first year of college. When students, and I'll show you the amounts on one of the slides in just a little bit as to what students can receive as part of their financial aid award package. And students don't need to accept student loans as part of their financial aid. They can just accept the free money and decline the student loans. But I'll talk more about student loans in just a little bit. And then there's work study. Work study is a federally funded part-time job on campus. It's also based on financial need. You have to do the FAFSA form to see if the student qualifies for this, but there are other work opportunities at the college level as well, and I'll describe some of those in just a little bit. But all of these different things could be part of a financial aid award package. If your sons or your other children may have gone to another college and they've gotten an award package, you might have seen all these different things in their awards and be familiar with some of this. But I'm going to cover all of them. Let's start with merit scholarships. How many parents want their children to get a merit scholarship? Yes! Again, all hands up. Absolutely. Well, merit scholarships are awarded in different ways at different schools. At the University of Miami, and I'll start with us, it's the common application. That's your application for admission to UM and your application for a potential merit award from the school. And every application type, and we'll talk about application types at UM and at other schools, every application type at UM is considered for merit awards, just based on your common application, all right? But some schools use the common application as an application for a scholarship, but not all of them do. Some of them have their own separate applications that they have to complete. So this is where the student should be starting a little Excel worksheet. And the Excel worksheet is their tracking worksheet, which says, oh, these are all the schools I'm going to. This is their admissions deadline. This is the way I'm going to apply to that school. This is their financial aid deadline. Do they have separate applications that need to be done for merit scholarships or other type of scholarships that the schools are offering or not? All right, but they have to track this. They have to do the research. And usually you can find this information on their websites, or you can call a financial aid office and just ask. And it's not always the financial aid office that's awarding merit awards. Our school at UM, we are the financial aid office, but we do not award merit awards. They come from the Office of Admission. All right, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But every school is different. So you've got to end up getting your students to track how their schools of choice award merit scholarships and whether or not they have to do a separate application specifically for the merit scholarship. And I'll come back to this in a little bit. But let's get started with some grants. Grants are the things that are free, awarded based on financial need. These are the federal grants that are out there. There's three kinds. They're all awarded based on pretty high levels of financial need. But there's a Pell Grant, which is up to about $6,800 a year this academic year. There's a Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which actually varies in amount based on school participation and how many students the school has, what their total enrollment is. But one thing about Pell Grants, if you're eligible for a Pell Grant, everybody who applies for financial aid and is eligible for it will get it. The Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, on the other hand, is what's called a campus-based award. What that means is the school is given a certain amount of money from the government to give out. Once it's given out, it's done. So it's given out on a first-come, first-served basis. That's why application deadlines are critically important, and I'll circle back to that thought process many times throughout this presentation. And then if your student is looking to go into a teacher shortage area and they want to go into education, the federal Teach Grant program is offered at many, many, many hundreds of schools throughout the United States. So they want to research via the school's websites or call in their financial aid office, find out if you potentially could receive these as part of the financial aid award packages. The most important thing is make sure you're meeting the school's deadline so that you're considered for everything that is available to your students. And Bright Futures. How many of you want your children to get a Bright Future scholarship? Yes. What does that do for you? It gets you, ooh, I'm in a weird spot or something there. The Bright Future Scholarship is set up to pay for what? A state school's tuition? Correct? It can be used outside of the state school system, though, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. But you do have to complete a Florida financial aid application. Not you, students. Will in approximately November, I would say. Is that correct, Iris?
We'll go to their classes.
All right. They're going to be alerted that if they're looking to go to any school in the state of Florida, and they are either going to be receiving financial aid from this, well, this is really about Florida state aid programs. This is not the FAFSA form. It's the FFAA. That's what this is. This is the Florida Financial Aid Application. It takes a few minutes to complete. It's not a big application. It's not like the FAFSA form or the CSS profile or anything like that. It is a form that's done with the Florida Department of Education to get on the Florida Department of Education's radar that you're going to be going to college potentially in the state of Florida. And you might be some people call it the Bright Futures application, but it's not. It's for the Bright Future Scholarship, it's for Jose Marti, it's for Benequisto, it's for a whole bunch of different state aid programs, and I'm going to talk more about those in just a little bit. And I'll give you the Department of Education, Florida Department of Education's website, where you can research eligibility criteria for these. This is not a need-based award. This is a merit program. It's a scholarship, okay, that your students earn based on their academic achievements and their community service hours. All right, they have to have a certain SAT, ACT score, certain weighted GPA, and a certain number of community service hours to qualify for different Bright Future Scholarship programs. And there's different tiers, and I'll show them to you in a little bit. These are awards that will, and I'll show you the amounts as well in a second, but they will vary from semester to semester. If any of your other children have Bright Futures and are in college, you'll know it keeps changing based on the number of credits they take, because Bright Futures pays for college on a per credit basis. And one thing, how many of your children are doing some kind of dual enrollment, AP, ACE credits, Cambridge, or anything that's getting them college credit while they're going to school here? Awesome. Those credits that they transfer into college don't count against the 120 credits that they have in Bright Future Scholarship money. Keep that in mind. Why that's important is when they're in college, maybe they can accelerate their time because of all their college credits that they've earned. But by having Bright Futures, that Bright Future Scholarship will continue to pay for up to 120 undergraduate credits until they earn a degree. So that means they could take another minor or something like that and get some money from the Bright Future Scholarship program to help pay for it. And also with Bright Futures, if they accelerate through their undergraduate degree and they attend a Florida school for grad school, they can use Bright Futures towards their first semester of grad school if they have not run out of the per credits, the 120 credits already. And also, if they choose a major that's over 120 credits, Bright Futures will pay for that higher than 120 credit major, like architecture at UM or engineering. We have some majors that are like 135 credits. You just have to make sure that the Bright Future Scholarship program gets something from the school confirming the number of credits for the chosen degree, and the Bright Future Scholarship program will adjust the total credits they can get to match the degree that your student has enrolled in, or the major that they've enrolled in. So let's get into more about Bright Futures. These are a little outdated. I'm going to give you the state's website so that you're going to end up being able to see the exact SAT, ACT scores for Bright Futures. But this gives you a guide. They have to have a certain weighted GPA. They have to have a certain ACT, a certain SAT score. And they have to have community service hours, like I said before. And there are 3 kinds. All right, like at UM, we accept the Florida. Yes, you can use Bright Futures at UM. I didn't mention that yet, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. But we accept the top 2. We don't accept Gold Seal, but you can use the students who receive a Gold Seal scholarship can use these across many, many hundreds of different schools throughout the state of Florida. And there are hundreds of different schools in the state of Florida. But the Gold Seal, Medallion, and Bright Futures. Florida Academic Scholars Scholarship is affectionately known as, or nicknamed, the 100% Award because it pays for 100% of a state school's tuition. This is the amount that you can count on, the orange numbers, that you can count on right now, because this is what students who are in school right now are getting per academic year from the Bright Future Scholarship Program based on which one they qualify for. Okay, the Florida Academic Scholars, the one that's affectionately known as the 100% Award, and pays for 100% of a state school's tuition. All of these can be used outside of the state school system, but they have to be used in the state. So you can use your Bright Future Scholarship, that Florida Academic Scholarship at the University of Miami, but this will be your amount at the University of Miami as well. They will pay to the private schools in the state of Florida the same amount of money that they would have paid had your student gone to a state school, okay? And whether it's Florida Academic Scholars, Medallion, or Florida Gold Seal, okay? This one is affectionately, people nickname it the 75% Award because it pays for 75% of a state school's tuition. Again, all of these are renewable for up to 120 credits. The amounts you see right here are based on an assumption of 30 credits an academic year. All right, 15 credits a semester. And as I've said before, if they take more credits, their award will be more for a semester. If they take less than 15 credits, their award will be less in that semester. But schools are going to initially award the students based on these numbers, okay, and adjust the award every semester to match their actual final scheduled credits. So keep in mind, this is one of those awards that just keeps doing this. And overall, you're going to get the 120 credits worth, as long as they're in school for 120 credits. But the award will vary from what you have as an award on your initial award letter. And sometimes, if you go to a school, like if you choose UM, and you say, I am test optional, because we are a test optional school, and I'm not going to submit SATs and ACT scores. That's totally cool. You can be accepted to the school, you can be awarded a lot of financial aid, you can be considered for merit awards and all of those other things, but we're not gonna know what your SAT and ACT scores are, and that's the same at a lot of other schools that don't require SAT and ACT scores. We use those SAT and ACT scores to estimate that your children will end up being eligible for Bright Futures based on the scores we receive. So we'll look at their GPA, we'll look at their SAT or ACT scores, and if they fall into the eligibility criteria, even before we know about their community service hours, we'll include Bright Futures in their initial award letter. If the Bright Futures Scholarship is not part of an initial award letter for your students and they're going to a school in the state of Florida, the schools don't get the list from the state of Florida as to who's eligible for Bright Futures until the summer. So it might not get added to their awards until late June. That's when we get the final list from the state. It's based on their final grades and their final community service hours, confirming they graduated, all that stuff. So keep in mind, if they don't get Bright Futures at the beginning of the awarding process, they'll get it if they're eligible for it. All right? It will be part of the financial aid awards, but it just may be a little while before they end up getting it to show up in their award letter. It will be before the billing deadlines for all schools, though. So just keep that in mind. Billing deadlines are going to be in like August for the fall of 2023. So before that, the schools will have this, so it will show up on the bill as a deduction, the way you want it to. And then effective access to student education. The state of Florida gives out a different award. This is for students attending Florida institutions, but not Florida state schools, not part of the 20 or some odd Florida state schools that exist. Like if you're attending the University of Miami, along with dozens of other schools in the state of Florida, this award is not a grant. It is not a scholarship. It's not based on need. It's not based on merit, but it is free money. We call it an entitlement award. All right? It's $2,000 a year that the state of Florida gives to Florida-based private institutions. We don't have in-school and out-of-school, in-state and out-of-state rates at the University of Miami, but students who get accepted to our school in our standard undergraduate program and who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, they get this award from the state of Florida. It's just money given to them, regardless of whether they're applying for financial aid or not, applying for need-based aid. If they get accepted, and you all, as parents, can prove Florida residency, and that's who's going to have to prove Florida residency, not the students. If your children are going to end up going to a state school or a private institution to receive any type of financial aid, the state school is going to require it for in-state tuition. So you're going to have to prove that you've been a permanent resident of the state of Florida for at least 12 months prior to them starting at the school of choice. That's whether it's, like I said, at a university like the University of Miami or at UF, UCF, Florida State, that type of thing. One thing, like I said, this is not need-based, it's not merit-based, it's just based on Florida residency. And the state, as long as you stay eligible for this, and there's renewal criteria for every kind of financial aid that exists, whether it be Bright Futures, whether it be merit awards, need-based aid, the EASE award. Students, there's an academic component that they have to achieve each academic year, and it varies by award type. And so they've got to make sure that they understand what they need to do to renew all of their awards. Some awards are stricter, like Bright Futures. If you get the top award, you have to have a 3.0 grade point average at the end of each academic year. You get medallion, you have to have a 2.75. Merit awards from the schools vary a lot. This, I think you have to have a 2.0, which you need to graduate anyway. But every award has a different eligibility criteria, an academic component that the student should understand, and that it might be good for you to understand it too, just so you know, hey, you saw their first term grades, they got to maybe work on it so that in the spring, they meet the renewal criteria for all of their awards. All right, and then there's the Benequisto Scholarship, which is the biggest award that the state of Florida gives out, and I'll show you the amounts in just a moment. But it is given out to the best of the best of the best. If your student gets a Benequisto scholarship, they're the top of the top of the top from the academic standpoint. They're a national merit scholar. They are probably in the 99th percentile on the PSATs, that kind of thing. However they qualify for it, they qualify for it. How do you qualify for it? You go to Florida Student Financial Aid SG, which stands for Scholarships and Grants.org. This is not the Benequisto scholarship website. This is the website for Florida Bright Futures, Jose Marti, any Florida state aid program that exists. If you want to look up the eligibility criteria, renewal criteria for any of their Florida awards, this is where you go. Florida Student Financial Aid SG, which again stands for Scholarships and Grants.org. All right, so I encourage you, give that to your students, make sure that they understand what they have to do. But as I mentioned, renewal criteria is huge for all different awards, but this is the strictest one of them all. All right, one thing, and why I want to put this up here, and not a lot of students get Benequisto awards, but the biggest thing is if your students get a Benequisto award, they're probably an A student their whole life. Honestly, throughout high school, A's, and then they're in college and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get a B, so I'm withdrawing. I'm not going to get a B on my record. Can't do that if you have the Benequisto award. If you withdraw from any class that you are that's part of your final schedule each semester, you cannot keep your Benequisto award in the future. They won't renew it. So that means for 3 years you might be giving up if you drop a class during your first year of college. And how much is it worth? It's a lot. They pay up to the cost of attendance at a state school. They do not pay for the cost of attendance at a private institution, but this money can be used outside of the state school system. You can use your Benequisto scholarship at just like you can the Bright Future Scholarship and the Florida, some other things I'm going to show you in just a second. But the Benequisto scholarship, they start off with the cost of attendance, the highest average cost of attendance at a state school, which includes books, supplies, meals, personal expenses, room, everything is included in that $24,000 number. And it's an example similar to like what UF's cost of attendance is. The number is set by the state. It doesn't vary from school to school, but even if you go to the University of Miami, this is the amount that they would end up giving to the student if the student goes to the University of Miami. They calculate it, as you can see on the screen, they take the cost of attendance minus your National Merit Scholarship, minus your Bright Futures Award, and whatever's left over is a Benequisto scholarship, okay? And this award is renewable for 4 years of undergraduate study, all right? So it's a huge award. If they're going to a state school and they get this, they pay nothing. They'll be getting refunds each semester, even if they're living on campus. All right, so keep in mind, if they do qualify for this, I hope they do, but not a lot of students get this. I just want you to understand that this is how they calculate it and that it can be used both in the state school system and outside of the state school system. Can't be used outside of the state, though. Same thing with Bright Futures. My daughter got the Bright Futures Top Award, and then she went to California. I was like, what? Luckily, she won some good scholarships and stuff. And she's my daughter, needless to say. I'll use her as an example in a couple other things in a moment. But there's also, the state of Florida just keeps on giving, an award that's based on financial need called the Florida Student Assistance Grant. This is one of those awards that is campus-based, which means the government gives X amount of money to the schools, and the schools give it out on a first-come, first-served basis. Again, they want to make sure that they meet every financial aid deadline that exists for the schools and for the private scholarships, which I'm going to talk about. Well, one thing about with private scholarships, though, you don't want to meet their deadlines. Students have to beat their deadlines by a lot, and I'll explain that more in just a minute. How many of your students have already started researching outside scholarships, private ones? All right, got a few hands there. Cool. This, up to $3,200 a year. That's the max limit that's set by the state of Florida. It does vary from school to school. Some schools may say we give it out $1,000 a student to more students, or $3,000 a student to less students. Really is up to the school, but it is given out on a first-come, first-served basis to those with high levels of financial need. And then when it comes to outside scholarships, and I'm going to spend a bunch of time on this slide, actually, because it's really important. For those parents whose sons have already started researching scholarships, this is the beginning of the scholarship season. The scholarship season is the period of time where scholarship application deadlines start to expire. Some have already expired. The vast majority have not. Like 95% of private scholarship organizations still have application deadlines that students can meet. And you can go to a whole bunch of different places. Your guidance counselors here, are going to be a great resource for scholarship opportunities, to find out more about different things that they may know about that they may be able to match your students up with. Business and industry, the public library, places of worship. You can find scholarships from everywhere. And again, students don't have to be a scholar to get a scholarship, but they do have to put time and effort into it. When my daughter was a sophomore in high school, my financial advisor, who also does financial aid guidance and things like that, just as a side thing, he ended up saying, your daughter's smart. She's got to be doing at least 200 applications for outside scholarships. I said, what? 200 applications for outside scholarships? I'm like, I've been in financial aid a long time, and I was thinking he was on something. Honestly, I was like, that's crazy. And my daughter, she's a pretty bright student, and she actually completed, what he told me was, it's a numbers game. You've got to send out dozens of applications, because if you send out 2 or 3 and keep your fingers crossed, the students are going to keep their fingers crossed and probably are not getting anything. Not to be a downer, it's the reality of outside scholarship applications. My daughter sent out 43 applications, and she got 9 or 10 out of 43. And she was up there in her class. All right? So it is seriously a numbers game. And I tell students, you got to think of outside scholarship research as a part-time job. This job starts right now. If they haven't gone crazy or researching, and I know many of your students are thinking, my mom and dad have money. I don't really even need to think about this. They have been saving for college for me this whole time. Parents with money. How many of you wish you could pay less for a college education? Yes! Honestly, but students have that mentality, and I've had those conversations. Being in higher ed for the last 30 some odd years, I've had those conversations with students. No, my parents are going to take care of it. That's why I didn't research scholarships. And then they get their award letter from the school in January, February, March, and say, wow, it doesn't pay for everything. And you say, wow, it doesn't pay for everything. You got to start looking into scholarships. And by that time, it's too late, because the application deadlines have already expired, or most of them have. This scholarship season starts now and ends in about March. It's the period of time where application deadlines start expiring. And you don't want to meet application deadlines. And I know from personal experience that you don't want to meet application deadlines. You need to beat them. Students need to beat them, especially for outside scholarships. Not for scholarships from a school, college, or university, but from private organizations, yes, you have to beat them. Why? Does anybody know why? First come, first serve, yeah, but they don't advertise it that way on their website sometimes. Sometimes, but more often than not, it's because they meet their quota of applications before their deadline comes. And they say, we just don't have the bandwidth to take more applications, so they just shut it off. My son, oh my God, this tech scholarship, he was so excited about it. He's like, it's me, I'm getting this one no matter what. They get that mentality. Don't limit yourself to the one. But my son was like, out of the dozen he was applying for at the time, he's like, this is the one. He's a week and a half ahead of time, logged in, and it's like blocking him. And he's like, oh. And it said, we've met our quota. Sorry, try next year. I was like, wow, what a heartbreak for him. It happened to my daughter too, but 4 years earlier. And I was like, wow, I didn't think it was going to happen to my son too. It did. For 3 of the scholarships he was trying to apply for, they met their quota. We met, and they don't advertise that they have a quota. Most of the time, they just shut off the application online and make a little announcement that we're not taking more applications. So, when it comes to outside scholarships, if the deadline's December 1st, they should be applying by November 1st. If it's January 1st, they should be applying by December 1st. And it should be looked at as a part-time job. I'm not kidding. And you should be nudging your students when you get home and saying, hey, you got to start working on this part-time job of scholarship research, because it can be a very lucrative part-time job. What do I mean by that? As an example, if your sons go out there and they end up applying for, or they spend 10 hours worth of time looking for scholarships from private organizations. And I know this, when you tell them this, yeah, you got to devote yourself hardcore to research and scholarships, especially boys. My daughter was so much more into it than my son was. But if they spend 10 hours worth of time researching scholarships and they get information on 15 different scholarships, now, they spend another 10 hours worth of time submitting these applications to these organizations. And now they've devoted 20 hours worth of their time, and they sent out 15 different applications. I ask students all the time, what if you only got one for $1,000 out of those 15? And some students will be like, what? No, I'm me. I should have had 5, 10, 15. This just got louder again. That was weird. But, that's not the conversion rate for scholarship applications to awards. You've got to saturate the market. You've got to be sending out dozens. And just if we look at that example of a student who spent 20 hours worth of time, got a scholarship for $1,000 out of those 15, look at that as a part-time job. They just got paid $50 an hour to research scholarships. They put in 20 hours, got $1,000. What if they got $4,000? They just got paid $200 an hour to research scholarships. What if they spent twice that much time and they get $8,000, $10,000? I think my daughter got $14,000 worth of outside scholarships. But she sent out 43, I think, different applications, met the deadlines. It's a numbers game. Your students can get a lot of outside scholarships, but they gotta wanna do this. They have to put the time and effort into it. They know you're not gonna do it. But a lot of times the students are like, nah, mom and dad, we're all set. And you're like, no. Part-time job starts now. It can be a lucrative part-time job because I know they are not getting paid $20 an hour in their part-time job that they're in right now. Or many students, like my son, hadn't worked a day in his life before he started college. It's like, what? I was working since I was 8 years old. I'm number 11 out of 12 children. I don't come from an independently wealthy background. But when it came to college, I knew when I was 13 years old, I'm on my own. You pay for your own college. So it was a different mentality at a different generation or a few generations ago, it seems like. But what other sources do you have? I mentioned before the colleges have a lot of opportunities for merit awards or possible other types of scholarships that you can apply for within this college or university itself. Sometimes the admissions office offers the scholarships. Sometimes the financial aid office offers the scholarships. Sometimes it's different academic departments within the school or college that they're looking to attend that offer scholarships. And maybe you have to apply for them. And maybe 2 or 3 different applications that are available within each different school or college that they're looking into. But you've got to find that out. Students have to do the research. You got to put the onus on them. All right? Even like at the University of Miami, all of our merit awards, 90% are given out through our Office of Admission. The only other office or department that gives out a merit award is our Frost School of Music. If you're from Miami, you've probably heard of the Frost School of Music somewhere at some point in time. But our music students have to audition for talent-based merit awards. So in addition to the, and this is just why, I'm just mentioning this because it's like this at a lot of different schools. Other different academic departments might offer scholarships. But you're not gonna find out until the students contact the schools and ask the questions. All right, and then outside scholarship research. What you see here at the bottom, these are some of the major search engines that are available for outside scholarship research. Fastweb.com, scholarships.com, GoMary.com, there's a whole bunch of them. And I know Ms. Martinez's office has all that information available for the students and on probably, I don't know if it's on the website and things like that, but again, her office is a great resource for outside scholarship information and guidance. So that's why they are here. So make sure that your sons are tapping into them as a resource. And these are just search engines, all right? These are used to help students find scholarships. And I'll talk more about that in just a little bit, but they're free. They don't cost anything. Just have to create a profile, and I'll talk about the profiles in a little bit. But this is, like I said, it's a numbers game with outside scholarships especially because you need to be sending dozens of applications out. If it's really important, if you've already got the funding and your 529 plan's all set, we can cover the cost of whatever school they choose. Happy, happy, joy, joy to you. Fantastic. But I know as a parent, you probably want to pay less if you can. So again, get them working on that outside scholarship process in that part-time job. Tips for scholarship research. Don't rule yourself out. Scholarships are given out for every reason under the sun. Not just based on grades. They're based on your hobbies, your career aspirations, what you've done in high school, just kind of like how you get accepted into schools, colleges and universities. They look at a lot of different things. Same thing with this, with scholarships. Don't rule yourself out. It's not just about being a scholar. Apply for as many awards as possible, saturate the market, when it comes to outside scholarships, send out dozens. You're better off. You're exponentially going to increase your chances of being able to receive a scholarship if the student is sending out dozens. Pay close attention to deadlines. Like I said, beat them, don't meet them. And then look for scholarships from a variety of sources, like I said. And then tell friends and family, you all, share on social media. My son's going to school for engineering, marketing, business, education, whatever it is. Does anybody know of any organizations that are giving out scholarships for this? You might, through your friend network, through Instagram or Snapchat. You're on Snapchat, right? Just joking. Facebook, the adult kind of things. Snapchat. I've never been on Snapchat. I see the kids play around. Does it even exist anymore? Snapchat's still around, or TikTok take over? Snapchat's still there? Okay, good.
We use it to text each other so we don't see what it is.
Oh, wonderful. But y'all can use the adult versions of everything, and they can use their own networks too to see if they know of anybody, another friend's parent, that had another student go to college for what they're looking to pursue a career in. And I'll get to this in a second, but the search engines that I mentioned, like fastweb.com, scholarships.com, gomarry.com, and there's a few others. I tell everybody, utilize them and don't be very specific about yourself when you're creating a profile on these things. If it asks you, what is going to be your major? What's going to be your career aspiration? That could be several different things. Yes, they may want to be an engineer right now, but how many people change their major in college? Anybody? Nobody? Change their major at all? I did. My daughter did twice. So, and what you go for grad school may not be what go to grad school for, may not be what you went to undergrad for. All right? So when you're creating a profile and it asks you, what are you going to do as a career? Be very vague. Yeah, I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a physicist, and an engineer. Because they're not going to verify it. All right? If it asks you, or do you have any hobbies? No. Yes, you do. Do you like sports? Not really. Yeah, you do. I like soccer, baseball, football, and lacrosse. All right, because what's going to happen, the more information, the more generic you create your profile on those search engines, the more information gets funneled down to the student. And then you can weed through the ones that they can actually apply for or not apply for. Okay? But if they're really very specific and not generic, they won't get very much information. So keep in mind, my children have done it this way. It's worked. You'd be surprised. It's not like just because you're a soccer fan, you have to play soccer to be able to apply for the scholarship. You don't really have to be a soccer fan sometimes, too. I'm not kidding. But watch out for scholarship scams. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide because I teach personal finance at UM, and I see a lot of identity theft issues happening from scholarship scams. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And write thank you notes. Not you. Parents, do not write the thank you notes to the scholarship organizations. Quick little paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences, thank you, signed and dated from the student to the scholarship organization. It can go far when it comes to, oh, wow, I remember that person because they sent this really nice little letter or a card back to the scholarship organization thanking us for the scholarship. That helped my daughter renew a couple of the awards especially during the COVID pandemic time where organizations didn't have the funding they used to have. And they were thinking, yeah, we can only renew a portion of the students. But when you do write these little thank you notes, send a little card saying thank you, or follow up with a phone call to the organization thanking them, they'll put that a lot of times in the record saying, wow, this student sent in this, they said thank you, and then you get ranked higher for renewability for the next year. Who knows? It cannot hurt. That's all I could say. It definitely helped my daughter. And then when it comes to scholarship scams, all of this really just relates to you should have no financial aspect of applying for, there should be no financial aspect of applying for private scholarships. These should be charitable organizations that have already raised all of this money, not through application fees, all right? And they want to get the tax write-off and the PR for giving out a scholarship and all of this stuff. So they should not be asking you for money. They should not be asking you for your credit card information. They should not be asking for an application fee. There are thousands of free scholarships, and that's what your student should pursue. There are monies that are involved in applying for college. Application fees. Some colleges have application fees that you have to pay. The CSS profile application, which I'll talk about more in just a moment, requires like a $30, $25, $30 fee to apply. But when it comes to outside scholarships, do not end up paying anything. If they're legitimate charitable organizations, they've already got the money. And they shouldn't be asking you for credit card information. They shouldn't be asking you for your student social security numbers. Nope, they shouldn't. Maybe after they get awarded the thing, an award, you might be able to talk to them about giving more information, but not your financial records. I've seen scholarship scams when people gave their credit card information, sent in the check, and all of a sudden it's like somebody tapped into their bank account. They used their credit card information to purchase other things. They sold the information to somebody else. So be really careful of that. I've seen every kind of identity theft, and this is just one type. All right, when it comes to student loans, I said I was going to mention a little bit more about them, not too much. Federal direct student loans are loans that could be part of a financial aid award package. They could be a subsidized or unsubsidized student loan. Subsidized means that it's interest-free while they're going to college. Okay, you have to do a FAFSA form to be considered for student loans, this type of student loan. It's a need-based type of student loan, and they're not more than about $3,000 to $5,000, and I'm going to show you the amounts on the next slide in just a second. But a subsidized loan, if they get awarded one as part of their financial aid award package, is interest-free while they're going to college and straight through grad school. So it could be a loan. It's really the best loan in the United States because of the fact that it is interest-free while they're enrolled in college, and if they stay enrolled in grad school, and they stay continuously enrolled for like 7 years, it's interest-free for 7 years and only starts earning interest after they get out of college. Whereas an unsubsidized loan is a loan that does earn interest while they're in school. Interest rates are listed here for this current academic year, processing fee, but you want to learn more about the student loans. Keep in mind, if a student receives a student loan as part of their financial aid award package, they don't have to take it. You decide on loans towards the end of their senior year after you figure out all the free money. After you figured out whether they receive scholarships, grants, bright futures, merit awards, all these different types of things. Then you look into whether or not they may need a student loan. These would be in their name. They are not able to be denied in relation to they get them because they're eligible and they did a FAFSA form. And that's it. They just have to accept it in their individual schools' portals if they truly want it. And there's some other steps that have to go through, like completing entrance counseling. It's an educational program on student loans before the government will actually let them get a loan. But it isn't a complicated process, and they can't be denied for these. But how much can they get in these types of loans? Well, the red column, and it says freshmen, so students starting in college would be considered freshmen. The most they can get in a subsidized loan is $3,500. This is set by the government. I have students coming in and say, no, can I get another $10,000 in that subsidized loan? Sorry, you can't. The government sets the amounts based on grade level and whether they're dependent or independent. DEP and INDEP. And dependent and independent are defined by the FAFSA criteria, which means the student has to be like 24 years old to be independent, or they have to be married, or they have to have dependent children of their own, or they have to be a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, or an orphan, or a ward of the court. There's a few different things that are on the FAFSA that make them independent. But the red column is the most that students can get in subsidized loans based on grade level. The black column is the amount that they could be awarded based on grade level. Again, $2,000 a year in unsubsidized loan money. Okay? You have to have a certain level of financial need to qualify for the subsidized loan. But even if you don't have much financial need or you don't have financial need, your student can still get $5,500 worth of student loan money at a bare minimum from doing the FAFSA form. Okay? This green column, though, is for independent students only. It's an unsubsidized loan of $4,000 that independent students can get. And the only other group of people that can get it are students whose parents have been declined for a parent loan. Parent plus loan. And you're like, what is a parent plus loan? Well, it's a credit-based loan offered by the federal government. So most students are going to get an award letter that has like $3,500, maybe $5,500 worth of student loans on it. And because your sons are going to end up being considered dependent, they're going to not see more than that on their initial award letter. So keep that in mind. If you are, as a parent, denied for a plus loan, and what's a plus loan? Well, this is a plus loan. It's just like their student loan in relation to the subsidized and unsubsidized loans borrowed directly from the government. Okay, and the limits on the subsidized and unsubsidized loans are the ones I showed you on the last slide. The limit on a PLUS loan is the cost of attendance of the student at the school that they're choosing to go to. So you can get enough as a parent through this loan to cover whatever you cannot afford to pay out of your pocket. This is the most popular loan in the United States that parents utilize, but I encourage you to talk to your financial advisor, look at your resources, leverage your assets, see if you can get a better rate than you can get from the federal government on these loans. You might be able to get a home equity line or borrow against a business property, a business that you own. You know, there's a lot of options for you. This is the most popular loan that parents take out in the United States, and it is offered directly through the government, and it's a credit-based loan only. If you have good credit, you get it. If you don't, you do not. I do not have the credit score cutoff or anything like that, but you can learn more about it at studentaid.gov. This is a loan that's in your name. You're not co-signing for the student or anything like that. You're taking on this debt as a parent if you choose to. And you have to reapply each academic year for whatever you need for that next academic year. It's not like you're applying and it's good for all 4 years. You know, you have to get another credit check the following spring once you know what the financial aid will be for their sophomore year or the following summer. You know, so you got to keep that in mind. It is, like I said, it's a credit-based loan. They don't look at your debt-to-income ratio. They don't look at your income. And this loan can actually be deferred until after they're out of school, but I do not recommend you do that because this one does earn interest while the student is enrolled in school. So look at all of your options, including, and you can learn more on studentaid.gov, and that's also where you'd apply for a PLUS loan, but you wouldn't apply now. Don't do a credit check now because it's going to show up on your credit report as a hit, a hard inquiry now, and again, you're going to have to do it again in the spring, and it'll show as a hit in your credit report as another hard inquiry in the spring. You can only start applying for PLUS loans after, I think, March 1st for the fall. Okay, but you can learn about it on studentaid.gov. All right, and then there are private loans. And I tell students all the time, you've got to find a school that's the right financial fit for you. And I say it to our students. I said it to our students on this past Sunday. We had an open house at the U. And I told them, I go, we might be the right financial fit, but I do not want you taking on a ton of debt. You hear about the student loan crisis? This is the student loan crisis sometimes. Because students take on a lot of debt through private lenders with cosigners, and they need cosigners. Woo! I'll stay over here. That's the zone right there. I got to stay out of that spotlight spot. But they have a lot of options. ElmSelect.com is just a database of lenders. It's not a bank's website. ELM stands for Electronic Loan Management Systems Election Page. And what it does is it puts students in touch with dozens of lenders that their school of choice works with. And they'll find information on like Chase, Bank of America, SunTrust, now called Truist, Discover Loans, Sallie Mae Corporation. There's dozens and dozens of private educational loan options that you can be co-signers for. You don't have to be the co-signer for these, though. Anybody can be a co-signer. Aunt, uncle, cousin, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, doesn't make a difference as long as they're credit-worthy. And they will look at debt-to-income ratios. They're going to look at the credit. And that's going to dictate what the interest rates are on this. And every company has different interest rates. But I tell students, like I was starting to say earlier, you got to find a school that's the right financial fit. Have a whole bunch of schools that you're applying to, not 2 or 3 because I just want to go to these 3. You got to be applying for 10, 15, until you find out all the award packages and you make sure that you, especially the students, and I say this to them all the time, parents, you make decisions as adults. Yes, your students are adults or they're about to be adults, but they're not ready to make a lot of adult decisions that without understanding the long-term ramifications. When it comes to borrowing loans like this in the students' names, you don't want to end up borrowing more than they can comfortably afford to pay back based on their career salary when they graduate. All right, and there are limitations, and I educate our students at UM all about that, and I'll tell students, don't come to UM. If you're going to be taking $30,000 a year out in these type of loans, and you're going into education or you're going into something you're not going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, that is a decision they have to make on their own, but it's a lot of debt. And I remember there's this quote I heard in a conference from the director of financial aid at Harvard, and it said, those law students who live like lawyers while they're in college will live like college students when they're lawyers. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I thought it was great. It was like last week, 2 weeks ago. And I was like, I'm going to use that quote. But it's true. Really, if they're living like rock stars, before they're rock stars, it can come back to bite them in the butt. All right, so I got to stay away from that spot. But this is an option. It is a loan that can be taken out up to the cost of attendance by the student with a cosigner. That doesn't have to be you. Can be you, but it doesn't have to be. And then we're done with loans. No more about loans. We're going to talk more about scholarships and other opportunities. But work study, that federally funded part-time job on campus. All right, that could be part of their financial aid award package. It's a need-based award, and it is not a grant, it is not a loan, and it is not a scholarship. It is the amount of money when they get an award, and it says $3,000 in work study. That doesn't go towards their tuition. It goes in their pocket if they participate in this work program called work study. They don't have to. They can decline this too. But there's a lot of benefits to working on campus. For the students, you get a paycheck. For the parents, their graduation rate potential increases. Statistically, students who work on college campuses have statistically higher graduation rates than those who don't or those who work off campus. But work study, great opportunity. It's a networking opportunity. Get to learn more about the school of choice. Learn more about the inner workings of the school. Start building their resume. They might be able to get a work study job in an area that they want to pursue their career in. At UM, we have 9,000 or so undergraduate students, and about 4,000 work on campus. 4,000, almost half of our undergraduate students work on campus in one capacity or another. And about 60% work in the work study jobs on campus. But at UM, and most schools in the United States rely just on work study for student employees. But a lot of the private schools have their own funding. So we have about 40 to 45% of our students work in what are called student assistant positions, which are non-need-based work opportunities on campus. But most schools just rely on this need-based program to fill the seats in their student employment opportunities on campus. So you got to find out how the schools work. Will there be work opportunities when they get there? This is a need-based award given out on a first-come, first-served basis. They have to do the FAFSA form to see if they qualify for this. All right? And I encourage students to work as much as they can within limitations. Work study, just so you know, normally it's around like 9 hours a week that students work. In the state of Florida, what's the minimum wage now? As of last week, it's $11 an hour. It just went up. And that's what they get paid, okay, in the state of Florida. Every state's got different minimum wages and things like that. It's weird, but it is the reality. But they get paid. They get a paycheck. You have to send them less money, pocket change for them. So it might be play money for them, and you get them to earn it. And maybe it's their first job ever. They're not usually brain surgery kind of jobs. You could get into a research opportunity and that kind of thing where you're really using your mind, or you could work in the gym, and just chill out, do homework, check people in and out, that kind of thing. And so this is, like I said, an opportunity for them when they get into college to start making a paycheck, start building a resume. And again, from a parent standpoint, it can potentially increase their graduation rates. And then Florida prepaid tuition plans. This is not financial aid. But Florida prepaid is something it's an investment, that is used by parents, kind of like Florida 529 plans as well. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. But these are set up to pay for a state school's tuition. But they can be used outside of the state school system. This money can be used outside of the state. I use it to pay my daughter's college out in California. I use it to pay my son's college here at not here at but you get it, at University of Miami. It is set up, and everybody may have a different plan. You might have a 2-year plan, a 2+2, a 4-year plan, a fees plan, a tuition differential plan, a board plan. Everybody's got a different plan. But if you are getting if you have the Florida prepaid tuition plan, once you've chosen a school, you have to make sure to tell the Florida prepaid tuition plan by calling 1-800-552-GRAD and letting them know what school the student has chosen. And then you have to they'll tell you what to do. If it's in the state school system, it's simple. If it's not in the state school system, you have to do a transfer form. Like if you wanted to use it outside of the state school system, you got to transfer the information out of the state school system into the private sector or outside of the state of Florida. And then you've got to contact the billing office at the school of choice to get the billing started. And once you do that, it's on autopilot. Once that's done, it's on autopilot for every semester they're there. As long as they stay continuously enrolled, schools just keep on billing them every single semester based on the credits that they're enrolled in. One thing about Bright Futures, and it's going to relate to Bright Futures in a second, Florida prepaid tuition plans, you get the most bang for your buck if you use them in the 20 or so state schools. You don't lose money in any way if you use it outside of the state school system. It's still an investment. It still made you some money. It did grow, it's going to be worth more than you put into it. But it's worth the most in the state school system. As an example, personally, I have the 4-year university plan for both of my students, my children, sorry. But for both of my students and I keep saying that, I go back to it. But for them, we looked at state schools. And if they were in a state school, or if you have a 4-year university plan, what the Florida prepaid tuition plan will pay to a state school, or any school, is about $158 a credit. All right? But that's not how much a state school costs. A state school costs about $210 to $215 a credit. What happens with Florida Prepaid, there's an agreement between Florida Prepaid and the state school system that whatever Florida Prepaid pays to the state school will, in a sense, just cover whatever the tuition is at the state school. The state schools agree to wipe out the difference between the $160 a credit approximately that they'll be paying for a 4-year university plan and the $210 or $215 a credit that it costs to go to a state school. They agree to wipe that out. Unless you have the 100% Bright Futures award, then they don't agree to wipe that out. This is not good news because I got this when I visited Florida State for my daughter. It was one of the things I said, no, I don't want my daughter going to Florida State school system anymore because I literally thought my daughter got the $6,000 worth of Bright Futures and that she was going to get $6,000 from the Florida prepaid tuition plan. That doesn't work that way. If your children receive the Florida Academic Scholarship, and that's the only one I have personal experience with, which is the 100% one, the state will accept the $160 of credit from Florida Prepaid, but they don't wipe out anything else. So you get the most bang for your buck using it in the state school system as long as your student doesn't have a 100% Bright Future Scholarship award. I know that sucks. Honestly, you would think they're getting $6,000 from Bright Futures and about $6,000 from this, but it works out to be $6,000 from Bright Futures and maybe $4,000 from this. You still are making money. You still made money. This was still an investment. You still put in less than what it's worth when they get into college, but they get the most bang for their buck if they use it in the college state school system and if they don't have Bright Futures. What will happen in a private school? They'll pay us, $160 a credit. The private schools don't wipe out anything different. We accept the $160 a credit, and that's what you get. All right? Same thing if you go outside of the state. You can use Florida Prepaid outside of the state, and they'll pay the $160 a credit if you had the 4-year university plan. It's about that. But the other schools don't do any kind of wipe out of any the difference in the per credit rate or anything like that. We just accept the amount of money that Florida Prepaid pays. All right, but the reality is, like I said, the state school systems, Florida State, UCF, any of the state school systems, they all work that way. I don't know how it works with the 75% award medallion because I'm saying this from my own personal experience. All right, so you would want to end up calling them or calling the schools that they're interested in applying to and find out how each school works if they don't have the 100% award. I just told you how it works with the 100% award, but if they get medallion, which is the 75% award, $4,700 worth each academic year, you'd want to talk to the schools to find out whether or not you'll get more bang for your buck from your Florida prepaid account. All right, 529 plans. That's also through like the state of Florida. You know, it's offered through similar to Florida prepaid. But 529 plans aren't restricted to a per credit basis or anything like that. And they're just a savings plan an investment plan that you've created that can be used in state, out of state. You know, it's used to maybe pay for, maybe with the Florida prepaid tuition plan, you have prepaid for their first year of room living on campus. But you can't do that for all 4 years. All right, so your 529 plan might be paying for room for their second year, third year, fourth year, that kind of thing. So 529 plans are great. They're an asset. This is an asset of whoever the person is that put the money into the plan. This is not financial aid, but it can affect financial aid. It can affect need-based financial aid because this is one of your assets. It's one of your investments. Yours as a parent, not the students. This is not the student's investment. This is your investment on the FAFSA form, your investment on the CSS profile, which is actually better because the FAFSA and the CSS profile look less at your investments because you're older. If you're a student, if this was in your student's name, that would be worse. If the students have a lot of investments, they figure out that they're already being supported by you, so they should be using a lot of their money towards their education. Sounds kind of weird. It's better that it's an investment in your name as opposed to in the students' names. But again, if you wanted to find out how much it will be worth, you can't say, what will I get in the Florida prepaid plan next fall by calling this number. But you can find out if my student was in school right now at whatever school, how much would it be worth? They'll tell you right now. I can't believe that was my first drink. But how do you get on the radar of schools to tell them you're interested in need-based aid? All right, and it starts at the University of Miami on the Common Application. There's a question that asks, are you interested in need-based aid? In the portion of the Common Application that is specific, it asks, are you interested in need-based aid? We use that as an indicator to start asking for the FAFSA form and the CSS profile applications and tax returns for 2021, because that's what's going to be used on these forms if you're applying for need-based aid. All right, but every school's different. A lot of schools use this, but many other schools, especially FAFSA-only schools, which means they don't use the CSS profile, and that's about 85% of schools in the United States. They don't ask for the CSS profile application. They may be FAFSA-only schools, which means you may only need to do just the FAFSA form, and all you may have to do is just add the school to the FAFSA form. And remember, how many schools can be on a FAFSA form? 10 at a time. If you are applying for need-based aid, if you want to add more schools, you're going to have to get the FAFSA form processed, take the original schools off the FAFSA, and add new schools to it, and get those corrections processed so that all your schools of choice get the FAFSA information. This is if you're applying for need-based aid. This question at doesn't have anything to do with merit awards. Or your acceptance into the university. This has to do with need-based aid. So you got to find out whether or not the schools have a question on the Common Application about this, or whether or not the student has to somehow notify them that they're interested in need-based aid. It might be as simple as just adding the school to the FAFSA, and then the FAFSA gets imported into the system, and they award them financial aid if they get accepted. But how do you do what are these applications I've been talking about? The CSS profile application, like I mentioned earlier, it is used by about 15 to 17% of the schools, all the Ivy League schools, high-end private schools in the United States. If they're going to like a top 100 school out of the 5,000-something, 6,300 schools in the United States, they're probably going to end up having to do a CSS profile application. Not the state schools. The state schools do not use this. State of Florida schools, that is. But private schools around the country do. This is a form that is used to determine need-based aid from the schools themselves. This form, and keep in mind, this form will ask about custodial parent information and non-custodial parent information. So if a student is choosing a school that's a CSS profile school, which means they ask for the FAFSA and the CSS profile application, the FAFSA is only asking about custodial parent information, which is the parent they live with, that kind of thing. And if you're trying to figure out, oh, which parent goes on the form? Well, if you're married together, you both go on the form. If you're not, then it's the person that they live with, or you actually should be looking at the FAFSA itself, and I'll give you the FAFSA website in just a moment, and looking at the definition of which parent is considered a custodial parent. On this application, it's both custodial parents and non-custodial parent information. Has to be on here. Step parents, you got married, remarried, you can't exclude step parents from any of this process whatsoever, unless you're getting divorced. That's, of course, that's a different situation. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But the federal government, it's a law. You know, once you're remarried, that parent is now part of the financial aid process. There's no excluding them, even if they don't pay anything. I have a prenuptial agreement that says they're not responsible for anything. And I hear this constantly. Government doesn't care if you have a prenup. They're still part of the process. You still have to include their income, their assets, all that fun stuff. Sorry. You can't get around it. Schools don't have discretion with it. But this is available now. It came available October 1st. If you go, like I said, make sure you know if the schools of choice are requiring the CSS profile. Because I hate when I see students at UM, they got accepted. And then where it's like halfway through the spring and they're wondering why they didn't get a financial aid award. I'm like, because you haven't done the CSS profiler. We've been asking for it for the last 4 months in your portal. Have you been paying attention to your portal? And they're like, but I did my FAFSA on October 1st. Well, you didn't research us, did you? And you don't want to have that conversation because if they're turning in a CSS profile application in March, you know how aid is given out on a first-come, first-served basis? They may not get quite as much. All right, but when it comes to applying for financial aid in the CSS profile, again, there are processes where the schools may be able to waive the non-custodial parent requirement. Okay, if the student has no ability to contact the non-custodial parent, but you got to contact every school individually. It's not whether or not the non-custodial parent pays anything towards the student's educational expenses, life expenses, high school expenses, living expenses. You can't say, I don't want my ex to be included in the process. Schools are going to stop right there and say, sorry, you chose a CSS profile school, so you chose a school that requires both custodial and non-custodial parent information. And the only way you can have a non-custodial parent waiver approved is if you have no ability to contact that person. Or there's some real extreme circumstance like a restraining order or something like that. And it has to be documented through third-party documentation, through therapists and counselors and court documents and all these different types of things. The biggest thing is if you have no ability to contact the parent or there's something really extreme going on, not just they don't pay anything towards the education of or to the life of the student, call the schools. Find out if there's a waiver process at the school and how you can go, if they're a CSS profile school. And find out how you can apply for a non-custodial parent waiver. This battery may have just died. It's flashing. I don't know why that is the case. Hold on a second. Maybe I pushed the button wrong. No, it's on, it's off, it's on. There we go. It booted back up. We are good. As I mentioned already, CSS profile, on the FAFSA form, it's just custodial parent information and step parents if they're remarried. On the so again, and I already said this, step parents have to be part of the process. Unless you're going through a divorce, and I'm going to talk about special circumstances like that in just a moment. But what you do need is you're going to need to prep your 2021 tax records. Convert them into a PDF version. Make sure you sign them and have them in hand because when you do the FAFSA form, you can import your tax information from the IRS right onto the FAFSA form. If you're doing the CSS profile, you cannot. You actually have to type the numbers in, sadly. So, and the student is the one who completes the CSS profile application. You don't, but you should be sitting next to them while they do it because it's completed by the student with their own individual login. If you do a FAFSA form, both of you complete a portion of it. But the CSS profile is completed by the student. They have to have all of your information. You've got to be there with them, tell them how much you got in the bank, what your property is worth, what your business is worth, if you have any untaxed income, Social Security benefits, disability, whatever it is. All these questions are going to be asked about on the CSS profile and a lot of them on the FAFSA form as well. If you have a tax return that's 120 pages long, be prepared to submit the 120 pages. Your corporate tax returns, all your schedules, your 1065s, 1120Ss, your K1s, all that fun stuff. All right? But have all this ready in preparation for doing the application. If you haven't done it yet, just became available October 1st. You do not need to apply for need-based aid at most schools to be considered for merit awards, but there are, not UM. We do not look at financial need when determining merit award eligibility. But there are schools now in the United States that do require you to do a FAFSA form for them to look at that as a component of whether or not they would give you a merit award. I don't know the list of schools. It used to be no schools whatsoever, but over the last couple of years, I've heard that some schools are asking for financial need-based information to also be used in the determination of merit awards. But when you do end up, after you've done your FAFSA form, after you've done your CSS profile application, you'll get an email about this thing called IDOC. IDOC is not spam. Okay? It is the encrypted software program that is utilized by most schools in the United States, even if they're just a FAFSA-only school. It's a system that's offered by the College Board. And schools use this to collect tax records. So the school will pay College Board, like we do, and most schools do the same, even if it's a FAFSA-only school, to provide this service to the school. So they'll, in an encrypted fashion, collect your tax records and make it available only to the schools that you want it to be made available to. All right? And so you're going to be turning your tax returns, Social Security, I mean, you're not your Social Security stuff, your tax returns, your W-2 forms, all the schedules and everything like that, all the worksheets and everything to the schools, usually through IDOC. But not all schools use IDOC. So again, you have to find out how the individual schools collect tax records. Some schools may have an encrypted software program that they use directly through their own website. But you have to find this out. And the students are the ones that truly need to be paying attention to their portals. Because if they have anything outstanding, that can affect their acceptance to the school. Schools don't look at, like even we don't look at financial need when accepting a student to the school. But we will look at whether or not you've told us you're applying for financial aid and didn't, whether you told us you did dual enrollment and haven't turned in your dual enrollment transcripts, you told us you took the SATs but you haven't given us the final grades. Anything that's outstanding, including documents like this. Like if you tell a school, and this is not unique to if you tell a school, hey, we're interested in applying for need-based aid, and then we keep sending notices out saying, hey, you need to apply for need-based aid, need-based aid, need-based aid, and we don't get a FAFSA, we don't get a CSS profile, we don't get any tax records. That speaks to the commitment of the student to the school. And that can be held against them in the application process, admissions process at thousands of schools in the United States. So don't have anything outstanding. If your student did on the common application said, yeah, we're interested in need-based aid, but you said, what? I make $15 million a year. We're not going to receive any kind of need-based aid. Why would you answer that? Yes. Well, on the common application, you can't, you can't correct the common application, but you can correct the records with the schools themselves. So if for some reason your student said, yes, I'm interested in need-based aid, for example, at and you're not really interested in applying for need-based aid, you can call and say, we're not applying, stop requesting the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and we will. We'll stop. But we have to know that you don't want to do that. All right? We'll say you got to put it in writing. The student has to put it in writing on that they're not interested in need-based aid. That's fine. We'll take away the request for the FAFSA form, CSS profile, tax returns, and that kind of thing. And we won't bother you about it again. Or vice versa. If your student said on the common application, no, we're not interested in need-based aid, thinking you are all multimillionaires. And then you realize, hey, last year my business didn't do all that great. COVID happened, whatever, lost job, got laid off, going through a divorce, whatever. And you want to change it from no to yes. You have to contact the school because you can't correct the common application. All right, so if the schools use the common application, it's really important to note that you have to contact the schools directly if you want to correct that question, if they use that yes or no to need-based aid question. But again, this is how we collect tax records. You want to make sure that you submit them when they are requested, and it'll be requested via the student's portal. We will not be asking you for them. We'll be asking the students for them. And you might be thinking, but I'm the one paying the bill. I hear that all the time. It means nothing. They're an adult now. FERPA kicks in. All right? We can't even talk to you once they start at school unless they are now an assigned and approved delegate. They have to give us the right to talk to you. We can talk to you while you're going through the admissions process and that kind of thing, but the second they sit in classes, we cannot speak to you ever again unless they give us written authorization via their portal. And this is the same at all schools. And I will hear, but I'm paying the bill. They're not going to let that fly. It's not legal. So we make sure that your students create you as delegates in the system so that once they start at the school, we can actually still have conversations with you. So that's really important. But studentaid.gov, this is where you complete the FAFSA form. All right? And if you're not sure if you're going to be eligible for need-based aid, and you go into a CSS profile school, and you're like, oh, I got to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile, just do the FAFSA. Within a day or so, it's going to tell you what your expected family contribution is. And if that expected family contribution is over the cost of attendance at all the schools of choice, that means you're not going to get need-based aid. It's no big surprise here. You do the FAFSA, it's free, and if their expected family contribution number is over, like our cost of attendance is $78,000 a year when you live on campus as a first-year student. If you live at home, it's like $68,000. So if you do a FAFSA and it says your expected family contribution is $100,000, you don't have to, at a CSS profile school, you can just call a CSS profile school and say, we're not going to do the CSS profile because we know we're not going to qualify for anything. Because the CSS profile is going to have an expected family contribution that is probably a little higher than what is on the FAFSA. And we can waive the CSS profile application by you telling us we're not going to be doing it. So if you wanted to find out, are we eligible for any kind of need-based aid, you can play around with our net price calculator, which I'll talk about in a minute, or you could just do the FAFSA form, get a truly accurate expected family contribution number from the Department of Education, and use that to make decisions. This form is used by the 85% of the schools in the United States that don't use a CSS profile. They just use this one form. All right, and it's used to determine need-based aid from the government, need-based aid from the state of Florida, if you go into a Florida school, and need-based aid from the schools themselves. The CSS profile schools use the CSS profile to determine need-based aid from the schools. For a FAFSA, there's 2 logins you have to have. One, the student, it's called an FSA ID. If you haven't gotten it yet, you need to get it. You have to request it. It takes a couple days for you to get it, and then you can do the FAFSA form. And both the parent and the student have to have one. If you, as a parent, have an FSA ID because you went to college or your other students or your other children went to college, it's the same FSA ID for you. You don't need a new one. But if this is the first time applying for financial aid, log into this website, request it. It's one of the first things on the first page. Request your Florida FSA ID. It's what's used to electronically complete the FAFSA form, link your IRS records, and sign the FAFSA form. Because the FAFSA is completed by both the student and the parent. Student fills out their section, you fill out your section. And you can, as I said before, import your tax records right onto the FAFSA form. Because it's all part of the Department of Education. It's part of the government is what it is. But again, this is just custodial parent information. Non-custodial parent information does not go on the FAFSA form. Okay? It's just the custodial parent, and if they are remarried, the step parents. And it's available now. So if you're interested, do that right away. Changes of circumstances. I mentioned this a little bit just a little bit ago. If for some reason 2022 is not going to be as good as 2021 was, and you made more money last year, and then you're going to be making this year, you can appeal for additional financial aid based on a change in income. Only for 2022, though, for the fall of 2023. All right, so initially the FAFSA and the CSS profile would have 2021's income on it. You can't just go back and correct it to your 2022 income when you've done your taxes in January. You have to go through the schools individually. If you have any special circumstances like death of a family member, separation or divorce, maybe you are getting separated or divorced, but back in 2021 you filed jointly because you were still married. You contact the schools. We'll be able to separate the incomes. But there's a process that you got to go through at each individual school to make that happen. If you have medical expenses paid out of pocket in the tax year that the FAFSA is asking about, that can be taken into consideration. You can't have a lot of medical bills. We need to see receipts paid in the tax year that the FAFSA is asking about, because the FAFSA doesn't ask about these things. The CSS profile doesn't ask about these things directly, these types of expenses that you may have had. Even beyond this, there are other things like elder care expenses. Maybe you have your parents in assisted living, and you're taking care of your parents and paying for their assisted living. That's not asked about on the forms. You tell the financial aid offices about that at the schools of choice. And they'll walk you through the process of doing an appeal to see if you can qualify for more financial aid for the student. All right? And why does it say 11% of your income? That's not an arbitrary number. When the FAFSA is determining your expected family contribution, they already take away 11% of your income, assuming that you have that much to go towards medical expenses within your family. So your expected family contribution is not equivalent to your income. It's chopped down by a lot of different factors. One is medical expenses. So your medical expenses paid out of pocket have to exceed 11% of your adjusted gross income for you to appeal that. All right, so just kind of keep, then you might be wondering why that 11%'s there. It's just because the government's already eliminating 11% of your income before they've calculated your expected family contribution. All right, but how do schools determine financial need? Not an algebraic equation, not trigonometry, there's no chemistry involved. It's cost of attendance minus expected family contribution minus other aid equals financial need. Not every school awards financial need-based aid. I'll talk about how we do it differently in a second, but your cost of attendance, start with that. That includes things we bill you for, we will bill the student for, and yes, we will not bill you. We will be billing the student, and you'll be like, why? I pay the bill. You may, and that's okay, but we will be billing the student because they are now an adult. Oh my God. Hard to imagine, right? But for the things like I said, tuition and fees, room and board, those are things we bill students for if they're living on campus. Of course, transportation, personal expenses, books and supplies, we don't bill them directly for those. They are expenses they're going to end up having as a college student, and they're included in the cost of attendance. And the cost of attendance can vary from school to school. It does vary from school to school, and it varies within the school. Like at UM, like I said before, $78,000 if you're living on campus, $68,000 if you're living at home with mom and dad. It's at least $78,000 if you're renting. But every school is different, on campus, off campus, with parents, that kind of thing. But whatever the cost of attendance is, we subtract out that number that we get from the FAFSA form. That expected family contribution, that rough estimation as to what you should be able to contribute as a family towards the student's education throughout their first year of college. And again, it's not going to be that number is not going to match what you owe to the schools of choice. Your balance that it's going to be owed at your different schools are going to vary a lot. Now, maybe not so much in the state schools of the state of Florida, because they all pretty much charge you the same rates. And you can use Bright Futures at all of them. You can use Florida Prepaid the same way at all of them. And you can get a Pell Grant at all of them, if you qualify for Pell Grant, that is. But your balance amongst schools outside of the state school system definitely going to vary a lot depending on what they do in relation to helping you out with financial need-based aid. From the cost of attendance, we've subtracted out the expected family contribution, and then we subtract out other financial aid that can go towards that cost of attendance. Anything else they're getting that is being applied to their charges at the school is deducted. And this is just not an all-encompassing list, but outside scholarships, merit awards, state scholarships, Bright Futures, athletic awards, if they get them at the school of choice, those are part of other aid. And whatever's left at the bottom is their financial need. All right? If they're at the University of Miami, we're a little unique. Not all schools meet students' financial need. We do. We meet 100% of the need of all of our applicants, no matter how you apply, as long as you apply for financial aid on time. That includes international students and DACA students who want to apply for need-based aid. That's UM. That's not everybody. Some schools do not have any need-based aid. They don't give you anything towards that bottom line number. Some schools will only award 50% of financial need. So if this number is $40,000, you'd get 20. It varies drastically from school to school. It might be different by major and different demographics that they want to choose to award, in different ways that they want to choose to award students. But we are unique, and we've been doing this for the last few years now. As long as you apply for financial aid on time, by our deadlines, which I'll show you our deadlines in a little bit, you want to find out, how did the other schools work? Do they have need-based aid? Do they meet 100% of need? Part of the process, of looking at the schools and trying to figure out what's going on with them. If you want to learn more about our programs, miami.edu//within-reach. That is our program that outlines everything that you need to know, and I just gave it to you anyway. It's the calculation that was on the last slide. Cost of attendance minus expected family contribution minus your other financial aid, and if that bottom line financial need number, say, is $40,000, we have students getting $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year in grants from the school every year. Every year, if their need stays the same. I have students coming to me regularly during orientation and stuff like that. We just had that in the fall. Saying, Mr. Magnum, wow, UM was as inexpensive as going to UF because of the financial aid they received from the government, from the state, from the U. But every school is different, so you've got to end up finding out what other schools do. And then what do you have to start doing now? Right now, of course, Repeating it, if you're applying for need-based aid, do your FAFSA form, do your CSS profile applications. If the student's choosing a CSS profile school, make sure you submit all the required information, get on the students about this. Review the award letters that you're going to start getting as early as December. January, February, March, that's when award letters start going out, and it varies based on how you're applying to the universities and each school's rules. And I'll talk about how we do it in just a second as an example, but review the award letters. Find out, is the school the right financial fit? Do you have any special circumstances that the schools need to know about? Let them know about it. Find out if it's going to result in any additional financial aid for you. You know, make sure on an ongoing basis that the students or anything that's asked for, if you say, well, you think you already submitted your tax return, great. Keep in mind that the tax return, if you missed a schedule or something, we may ask the student, hey, you forgot Schedule C. We need that. And if they don't pay attention to their portal, it'll be one of those things that's outstanding that they haven't turned in. So you don't want that. Submit Florida residency documents, apply for loans in the summer after they're done school, and comply with tuition deadlines. It's really, really important. You know, you don't want to end up missing out where they could lose their spot in the class, they could lose their housing assignment, they could lose their schedule. And you got to keep in mind, you got to reapply for financial aid every year. These are the deadlines. These are our deadlines. It varies from school to school to school as to when you need to apply for financial aid, when you need to apply for admission into the school, and when you have to have your FAFSA form, CSS profile applications completed, and when we award financial aid and it sends you notices about acceptances. We have deadlines that are really close to each other because we want to, when you find out if you're accepted and being offered a position in the class, we want to end up making sure that you get an award letter as well. And at our early application pool, every group we're going to meet 100% of the financial need for as long as they're applying for need-based aid. And every group is considered for merit awards. And the schools of choice may have one type of application. We're kind of complicated. You got early decision 1, the binding contract, you got regular early action, regular decision, there's transfer students that aren't even on here. But you need to know what the deadlines are at all the different schools, okay? In our early application pool, November 1st applications, the early decision 1, the binding one, early action is the one where you can choose, you can compare schools. You're not contractually bound to the school to go to that school. These students are considered for the biggest scholarships at the University of Miami. Statistically, in the United States, students who apply as part of, if schools have multiple application types and they have early decision and early action, statistically acceptance rates are higher in those groups. Same at All right, so we'll get past this because we're wrapping things up right now. Financial literacy in higher education. Our money management program at the University of Miami, I'm the director of it. I think it's critically important. When I was young, I did not get any financial advice. I had a collection of credit cards by the time I was a junior in college, and I had a 560 credit score after 2 years of having those credit cards. Was that good? No, it wasn't. And you wonder, how's this guy got assigned to be the director of the University of Miami's money management program? Over my career, I have turned things around in a huge way, but this is what we have at We hope that students have this as an option when they go to college at their college of choice, because I know it's not taught in most high schools, and it is a great opportunity for students to get a jump start on their personal finances and more easily be able to achieve financial independence. I love to put this little statement up here all the time to all of our students. I end our Money Talk series, which our canes can go to, those are the types of sessions that we have. I tell students, making money doesn't make you financially successful, and people ponder on that sometimes. But I finish it with knowing what to do with it before you start making it and acting on the knowledge that you gain is a true key to your long-term financial success. This is the key to financial independence. And we put this into the minds of our canes all the time. And I hope they have a personal finance program at their school of choice. I want you to play around with net price calculators. This is our net price calculator. Every school has one. All right, miami.edu/NPC. This does not give you the exact awards. This gives you a rough estimate as to whether or not you can qualify for any financial aid from that school. And then your homework. Right now, find out the application deadlines. Make sure you meet them. Visit the school's net price calculator. Schedule your college visits. Get the students working on this part-time job. Find out how to apply for loans if you absolutely need them. You're not going to have to do that until the end of their senior year. Take billing deadlines seriously. and teach students to avoid emotional spending. Back to personal finance. I'm always throwing that in at the end. Get them to read books about personal finance, take a class, do research online, and parents, start sharing. How many of you have shared a lot of your personal finance stories with your kids already? Well, this is what I do at UM. I'm always telling them, share what you did right, share what you did wrong. Tell them what you did wrong and how you learned from it. Okay? Tell them what you did right. Share your accolades, all the good things that happened. How you got there, how you got to where you are right now. It's sharing time. They're adults. They can take it. They can handle it. You might not think so, but they're going to college. They are adults now. And with that being said, is there anybody here who learned nothing today? Awesome. My job is done. I'm going to call up for our Q&A and announcements right now, Miss Iris Martinez. So questions from those who are out there in the virtual world and questions from you all. So she's going to lead this for us.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Definitely a lot of information that Mr. Magnan has shared with us tonight. We had the opportunity to send out a survey prior, and a lot of parents submitted questions, which have already been answered throughout the presentation. Question number 1, was this session going to be recorded and available at a later time? To refer, the answer is yes. It's going to be on our YouTube channel, and I will definitely send a follow-up email tomorrow with that link directly so you could go back and forth. We've answered all the questions in the chat, so I wanted to give the group here today, right now, an opportunity if you had any follow-up questions.
Up there on the right.
First of all, thank you for all of this.
You're very welcome.
I might actually sleep a little bit tonight, so thank you.
Good. Feel a little more prepared. De-stress.
I'm more comfortable with that. At least I can finally say FIFA and not call it FIFA. But, so for the CIS profile, for the FAFSA, do we apply at each college or the
No.
main website and we link the colleges?
No, yes, that you do it that way. With the FAFSA form, you actually have 10 different schools you can put on the FAFSA form. But if they're applying for more than 10, like I mentioned before, you'd have to take, after it's been processed, that means it's already been sent out to those schools. You can take schools off and then add new schools on and get the corrections processed, and then the new schools will get it. With the CSS profile, they're usually pretty specific to the school, though. So you have to specify that you're going to UM and create, because there are supplemental questions. The main CSS profile application is pretty much the same throughout all the different schools that use the CSS profile, but then schools will throw in supplemental questions too that have to be asked specifically for that school itself. So the CSS profile is a little bit different. You just don't add a list of schools to it. It's a little bit more complicated, but there's no 10 school maximum. You're not going to have 10 CSS profile schools usually, because only 15% of the schools, unless you're applying for all Ivy League schools, and that might be the case. You never know, but that is always a possibility. Do we have? Yeah, but the CSS profile, the main form is the same, but you have to specify which schools, because the CSS profile through the College Board is going to tell you to complete these other questions that are school specific. That's part of the process. So you are going to have to pay for the CSS profile too, all right? And each application you submit is like $25. It's not one application fee for all 10 schools you're going to be sending it to or anything like that. You have to pay for each application you do with the CSS profile.
If I may add, so essentially for the CSS profile, that is only needed for schools, typically private schools, right? So a Stetson, a University of Miami in the state of Florida.
Yep.
If your son is applying outside of the state of Florida, depending on the institution, they will require the CSS profile as well, in addition to the FAFSA.
Yeah, but it's only 15% of the schools in the United States. Like I said, all the Ivy Leagues, be prepared. You're going to be needing the CSS profile. Not most of the other schools, but if they are in the top 100, you just have to find out. Check with the schools to find out which of the forms. You don't want to be surprised as to why you didn't get a financial aid award, and then you're like, oh, they needed the CSS profile too? I hear that a lot.
So the students will usually get a checklist once they apply. They submit their college applications on their student portal. So once a student applies to college, they're going to get an email letting them know, we've received your application, log into your individual student portal. That student portal, whether it's University of Miami, whether it's FSU, whether it's UF, whether it's Boston College, that portal will have a checklist item for admission related stuff, and will also have a checklist item for financial aid related stuff. So if your son is applying to a school that requires the financial aid, the CSS profile, they will actually say it, CSS profile due. My advice for our students, what we tell the students is it's important that they do the research prior, so they start gathering everything in advance so that they know, okay, I'm applying to 12 schools. Out of the 12 schools, all of them need the FAFSA, and only 3 of them will need the CSS profile. Each student will then complete the CSS profile for each individual school, as it is not a common universal application that they just add different schools and we kind of send out. So hopefully that.
Yeah, you will see it. It's easier to do the multiple different CSS profile applications because they're all pretty much the same application, except for maybe a couple of supplemental questions.
Any other questions?
Anybody? Don't be shy. I'm not.
That's good.
No, good. Well, I'm glad. Go to one more. Hold on. Yes, we can.
All right. So I wanted to show this. This is a resource that we have shared previously already with our students. It's if you go to bit.ly/resources and tools, you'll be able to find a Google Drive. This Google Drive is a folder of resources, wealth of information. The Center for College and Career Guidance, it's always adding information there daily as we get information from institutions. So instead of floating in your inbox every time we get something, we go ahead and put it here and we update it every day. So for the purpose of today's session for financial aid, if you click on the financial aid folder, you're gonna see some items, some documents there, PDFs, also large-scale merit scholarship opportunities by state per school, depending if your son's school is on the list, for example, Ohio State or Miami, what type of individual scholarships they offer. You could find that there. But another one thing that you should do if you go to the scholarships newsletter, which is a folder within the financial aid folder, you're going to find a newsletter database. So in August, October, and September, you'll find all the databases of all the scholarship newsletters. Once you click on any newsletter, right now October just has one because it's October 4th. But thank you, Chris.
I shouldn't be giving this to you, sorry.
Once you click on any PDF, you're gonna see a list of all the scholarships available, outside scholarships, with the amount and eligibility requirements, as well as the link of where your son should be applying to those. So this is definitely something that your son should be doing right now. Just like Mr. Magnan said, this is a part-time job. The greater the input, the greater the output, right? So definitely check it out. The resource guide at the bottom, that's a Word document. It says college search and scholarships. There, you'll also have the links to FastWeb, to scholarships, different databases of where your sons can also be creating their profiles and searching for those scholarships. So definitely helpful. And lastly, the next following slide is our workshop that we're gonna have Wednesday, October 19th. Is it clicking for the next? There we go. This is a FAFSA workshop for seniors and parents. It's going to be in our cafeteria from 6:30 to 7:45. We will have financial aid representatives coming that day, walking around and helping you complete your application, your FAFSA application. So definitely stay tuned for that. You have to RSVP. The reason for that is we want to have enough manpower here to help you guys as you complete this. Stay tuned for an email. The email will indicate what documents and what you should bring: a computer, a laptop, an electronic device so that you could work on your stuff, as well as your FSA ID, which Mr. Magnan said to create. So stay tuned for that email with all those details
And remember,
coming soon.
that's on which date again?
That is going to be, interesting, I never put it there. It's going to be
I was like-
Wednesday,
I'm like, did
October
I miss it?
19th. It's going to be Wednesday, October 19th for that, so definitely stay
There we
tuned.
go.
I promise you we're going to send you that email with those details for those. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. We truly appreciate it. We are as invested as you are in your son's college future. So as always, feel free to reach out. We're here to help you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome. And if anybody has a direct question you want to ask me, Feel free to walk up.
Could you
Have the microphone on when you ask.
put your slide back on with your personal information?
Yes, all the contact information here.
Yeah, there you go.